But just because you can get plates on it for Montana or Florida or Texas or Nevada or Washington or Oregon does not make it legal. Of all the cars I had, probably the one I get asked about the most is the Skyline R34 that I bought. It was the very first one that Motorex and imported to the United States and legalized. In America, we have what's called the 25-year rule. You cannot import a car unless it's 25 years old, and this is because of Mercedes and BMW lobbying the Congress back in the 1980s. What basically happened was that gray market sales were hurting the actual new car sales of manufacturers like Mercedes and BMW. So they lobbied Congress to say, this is hurting our sales, it's got to stop. We need to kind of put some moratorium on these cars before they come over here. So that's what happened. Motorex had found a niche by bringing over JDM cars from Japan. And of course, they started with the granddaddy of them all, the R34 GTR, which was newly released around 1999. So this one came in, it was a black one. I actually went to Motorex with Paul Walker. We actually looked at that car. We looked at a silver one. We looked at a white one. Paul couldn't make up his mind at that particular point, so he borrowed the Blackbird, the black car, before I bought it and drove it around for a couple of months. He actually did a video with the guys over at Max Video where he's talking about his R34 because that's the car he was driving. He was test driving that car, an extended drive test for a couple of months, and Sean Morris can verify that. Sean Morris was the guy who was working over at Motorex at the time. He was my guy, and he worked for Hiro Nanahoshi. So I went back there, and I, independent of Paul, and I said, I'm thinking about this car. I want to buy this car. What do you want for it? And we went back and forth a little bit. I think he wanted 95 or something like that. I got him down to 78,000. I said, fine, okay, here we go. Here's a check. Bought the car, drove it home. So Motorex was bringing in cars. Basically, they have to federalize the cars, right? So they've got to do crash bars on the side of the cars. I think there's glass requirements, airbag stickers, all kinds of stuff that I don't even know the whole process. Sean Morris is the guy that does it. And some of it's proprietary. But then all these cars have to be OBD2 cars so they can run computer, the diagnostics on it and all that. It all have to be smog legal. So you got crash, you got emissions, all that kind of stuff, and HTSA inspection, all that. So G&K Technologies was a company who was always doing the certification of these cars. So you pay the price of the car to buy the car, the shipping to get over here, the federalization and the reconditioning of the car. It adds about $25,000 to the sticker of the car, more or less, depending on the equipment you either option or came with. So there's a whole process. So those cars, they were up over, $85,000 at that time for a base R34. And then if you put mods on, it costs more. So they were having a pretty good business, and they were starting to legalize some cars. And they went through a total of about 14 to 16. It's a little fuzzy there. The problem is that place was up near Torrance. I don't know if you know anything about Torrance, California, but it's a big Japanese population there. Nissan was there for years. Toyota was there for years. The Toyota Lexus campus was there for years. There's several other manufacturers. I feel like Hyundai was over there. I forget, but there was at least Nissan and Toyota. Oh, Honda was there as well. So a big Japanese community had popped up there, and it predominantly Japanese. A lot of Japanese companies. NGK Sparkplugs had a headquarter there. Nippon Denso had a building there, and so forth and so on. It was big. What do they have when you have Japanese people living in a community? You have Japanese restaurants. You also have something called the Hostess Bar. The Hostess Bar is quite an adventure. You walk in there and you pay pretty girls to sit down next to you, and you buy them drinks, and you have drinks as well, and they're good conversationalists, and it makes these people feel like they're at home. I had a few Hostess Bar experiences when I was living in Japan. I worked for NGK at the time, and I went into a bar. We went into this little Hostess Bar that was pretty much on the up and up. I had no idea what they were. I didn't know because I wasn't paying the bill that, you're drinking and then you pay for the girls. I had no idea because the big bosses paid the bill. Well, this one night, and I'm not a drinker, I've never really been a drinker, but this one night I was indulging. It was 2 days before I left the country, and I'm drinking a bunch of sake. I had 13 sakes. Now, when you're talking to the Japanese boss of a company, you're supposed to stand up and bow. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Hi, Mr. Suzuki. Suzuki-san. Hi, yes. So Suzuki-san looks over me at the end of the night. I'm 3 sheets to the wind. I got 2 pretty girls sitting next to me like this. One of those long tables, and you got everybody sitting around the table. Suzuki sitting at the head of the table. Japanese people like to fall asleep when they're talking, or they look like they're in deep contemplative thought or whatever, but they look like they're sleeping. So Suzuki kind of wakes up from his stupor, or just kind of comes to and look at me. It's 11:30, last train out of the city, got to go back home. He goes, Craig-san, are you having a good time? And I'm sitting here with 2 girls that I'm regular now. That's probably the 4th time I'm in the place, right? And they like it because they don't have a lot of Westerners at that time in Nagoya who speak English and a little bit of Japanese. I speak a little bit of Japanese. And so you're supposed to jump up and say, yes, Mr. Suzuki, thank you very much. And I said, just like this, Suzuki-san, I'm having a very good time. And the two junior executives sitting across from me were mortified. Just like, that's not what you're supposed to do. Anyway, come to find out later that Solstice bars, some of them are a little bit lecherous, where you can go into, there's some debauchery that goes on in there. Apparently, Hero had a thing for those kind of bars in Torrance, and he was spending a lot of money on nose candy and other things, allegedly. So the money that should have been going to pay vendors and G&K Technologies was kind of getting, Ponzi'd back and forth, that kind of thing. And so things started to pile up, and eventually people were getting pissed. And there's a good article in Sport Compact Car that's floating around on the internet. I did a video on it as well, where I sat down with Sean from Motorex and we tell the story. But basically, people started to come to get the cars, and a bunch of cars got stolen. There was a kidnapping involved with somebody, gun charges, all kinds of stuff. And then when Hero went to court, and nobody knows the disposition of that case, apparently it wasn't a huge thing because they didn't lock him up for 10 years, but he left the country and he was gone. So here's the problem is, there were 14 to 16, with the exact numbers unknown, that are truly federalized R34 GTRs. Now, I know everybody's saying, I see R34s at every car meet, There's hundreds of them floating around. It's contraband, okay? They're bringing this stuff up through South America. They go to Miami. You can get anything through the port in Miami, which makes me scared for American security, but that's another discussion. But just because you can get plates on it for Montana or Florida or Texas or Nevada or Washington or Oregon does not make it legal. Doesn't make it legal. It's still cocaine. As far as the federal government's concerned, it's cocaine. Doesn't matter how you got it here, it's a controlled substance. So if somebody's telling you that they have a Motorex car, bullshit. There's a registry online where all the cars are listed. There are a few missing from the list. We know there's exactly 14 to 16, 14, 15, or 16 cars. That's it. So if anybody's telling you something different, they're full of shit. And that's why Motorex is gone and why these cars are still illegal today. For people to buy a $100,000, $125,000 R34, it didn't make sense back in the early 2000s. Who the is going to spend $125,000 for a 276 horsepower car? 276 horsepower. There's a lot better cars out there for the same kind of money. A lot better. You got to think what Ferraris were selling for back then, right? You can get into any number of used Ferraris for that kind of money. Lamborghini, my first Lamborghini, I paid $145,000 for the car. And when I sold my GTR, before the funds even hit my account, I had a deposit on a Lamborghini Diablo. It was like the cars crossed on the interstate. So it just doesn't make, R34 is a total fanboy car. I get it. You play it in video games. We all get a hard-on over the car and all that. It's great. It's the ultimate, it's the king of the Japanese JDM cars. I get it. But when you drive it, it's an Evo 10, really, if you think about it. But, it's that fantasy thing. You want it, it's aspirational. The cars you couldn't afford, I get it. There's a lot of people who go out and spend good money on used Monte Carlos. I don't know why. It's not a car I would want. But if you want it and you never had it, you want what you have, you can't have. It's human nature. So the values are going crazy. I was just in a Midnight Purple 2. My buddy Paul bought one. He sold his McLaren and bought that. He had to sell his McLaren to buy a Midnight Purple GTR. I'm like, yeah. Remember when I sold my car for $200,000? A movie car today, the car would be worth 7 figures.
Premier Financial Services has been a sponsor of VINwiki for the last 4 years, and we can't thank them enough for their support, and we love them for that, but also because their simple lease truly is a tremendous product in the world of exotic car financing. They allow you to minimize your payment, minimize your down payment, take all the tax advantages that are available for a lease, while still giving you the ability to move in and out of cars and accumulate equity. So they structure it in a very unique way that's hugely advantageous, gives you a lot more buying power, and their customer service is absolutely incredible. So we love Mitch and their team for their continued support of the channel. We thank them for that, but please visit them at the link in the description below and find out how easy it is to buy your dream car through Premier Financial Services.